I'm part of this process since 2019 when I heard about it, but I know that we are part of transition in Romania and in the Jiu Valley since the 1990s. In the Jiu Valley, actually more specific, since 1997. That was the point when the Jiu Valley had more than 170,000 inhabitants, 50,000 miners working underground, so that's a huge huge numbers. Now there are only 2,000 working underground in the entire Jiu Valley. And regarding the population, we have 40% of the population in the Jiu Valley. As I saw it in the Eurostat statistics, we are the region which is undergoing the population in the highest rate. Hunedoara County and also the Jiu Valley as part of the Hunedoara County. So what we understood since 2019, when we become part of this just transition process, is that this transition cannot or should not be the one who is happening because this is the state of things or the way things are happening, but we can also be part of this transition in order to, I don't know, to create directions in those, in order to sustain actually the vision that we, the youngsters from this area, have for the just transition areas. In our case, for the Jiu Valley, for the Hunedoara County, or the counties which are along the Jiu River.
So I left Jiu Valley to go to the university, and then I was working abroad and in Romania, in the largest cities. But all the time I tried to be connected with the region. And first I wanted to find an NGO, a local NGO, to support from where I was. But I couldn't find any, so I decided to found Valea Jiului Society. This is the NGO that I founded. And it was very hard at the beginning because I was trying to find online involved people, but everybody used to tell me, look, it's very nice what you want to do, but just pick another town, here nothing is possible. And I kept looking for people, and I started to find several, not so many, but we were at the beginning we were 4 people, and we created this NGO coalition, the Engaged Jiu Valley, and from then things were going very nicely because we started to put things together.
Ja pamiętam, jak zaczynaliśmy słyszeć najpierw o pojęciu sprawiedliwej transformacji. To był rok 2017-18. Wtedy w przestrzeni publicznej nikt nawet by się nie odważył powiedzieć coś takiego jak przyszłość Konina bez węgla. Wtedy politycy, decydenci, osoby wypowiadające się w mediach lokalnych nie mówiły, w ogóle nie odważyłyby się na taką wypowiedź. Dzisiaj jesteśmy w miejscu zupełnie odwrotnym. Strategia miasta Konina przewiduje taki scenariusz. Strategia województwa przewiduje taki scenariusz. Jest przygotowany plan sprawiedliwej transformacji regionu, są przygotowania na różnych poziomach administracji lokalnej i samorządowej, więc myślę, że pod takim kątem no jest to zupełnie odwrotna sytuacja niż ta, z której zaczynaliśmy. Jak temat sprawiedliwej transformacji został przez nasz region podjęty i można powiedzieć, że praktycznie każdy rok to jakiś kamień milowy na tej drodze.
So actually it all started in 2018 because there was a first meeting of the stakeholders involved in the process. And actually I wasn't invited by all of those bodies in charge of the process, but I was invited by other NGOs that I was cooperating in other projects, and they told me that there is a meeting with the local authorities, NGOs, workers from the coal mines and power plants. And I was like, okay, I can come because it seems like an important issue. And I remember this was a very significant meeting for me because I was listening to all of those people, and no one mentioned the youth. Everyone was talking about energy, about mining, about infrastructure. And I remember also that not only youth wasn't involved, but the social stuff wasn't that much involved in the beginning. So I think that was an issue for our region, that at first all of the stakeholders were mostly concerned that it's energy transition, it's infrastructure, and they didn't see it as a just transition, as something that's very important for the local society. So I stood up and I said, you will build new roads with nobody to drive on them, because young people will emigrate from the region. And everyone was looking like shockingly on me, that I was so kind of brave to stand up and say what I think. And that's how it's actually started.
The Just Transition process, or the Just Transition Fund, was one of the biggest priority of the new Commission when they started 2019. It became as a real implementation of the principle of leave no one behind, which was in the Green Deal objectives, but there was no mechanism at that time when the Green Deal was adopted. So Just Transition Fund was the special fund created by the European Parliament in a very quick and effective manner. The fund was voted, and the process started across all the Just Transition regions in Europe, mainly focusing first as a first wave on the coal phase out, because the transition could happen only if everybody, every segment of the society is really part of this transition. We speak about sometimes regions which are 80% of economy is run by a mono industry, I mean like coal or cement or steel, it's a big challenge.
Ta praca nad procesem pokazuje mi, że transformacja to nie jest prosta sprawa. Ona nie dotyczy jednej grupy. Ona dotyczy bardzo szerokiej grupy interesariuszy i samo włączenie, samo nawet zdiagnozowanie w tej strukturze miejskiej czy regionalnej, w naszym przypadku, wszystkich tych grup jest trudne. A zaproszenie tych ludzi do współpracy jest jeszcze trudniejsze, a zapewnienie tego, żeby każdy czuł się zaopiekowany i że te odpowiedzi do wszystkich dotarły, to już w ogóle graniczy z cudem. Więc myślę sobie, że takie dwie grupy, które ja bym wskazała jako takie priorytetowe, tak? Które bez żadnych wątpliwości muszą być objęte wsparciem, to są pracownicy, którzy siłą rzeczy jako pierwsi odczują te negatywne skutki transformacji, czyli zwyczajnie stracą pracę albo będą postawieni przed sytuacją zmiany tej pracy. Więc to są, mówię, osoby, które pierwsze staną w tej stresującej, sytuacji. A w drugiej kolejności to są ludzie młodzi, bo tak naprawdę ten proces będzie trwał może 20, może 15, może 25 lat, nie wiemy. Ale na końcu tego czasu są ci dzisiejsi młodzi ludzie i to dla nich robimy tą rzeczywistość. Więc myślę, że te dwie skrajne na osi czasu grupy wskazałabym jako priorytetowe.
As a region, we were obliged to prepare a Just Transition plan, and because of that procedure, some workshop groups were established. So I personally worked in society and environment workshop groups. As it is obvious for me, those two issues are the most important for me. Actually, when I saw these groups, so society, environment, infrastructure, and energy, I was thinking, okay, maybe youth is a part of the society topic, but I think it's just too broad to get what it takes to make the young people involved in the process. So I suggested to the Regional Development Agency, which is until now it's like the main body in charge of the process, I suggested that we should make a 5th workshop group regarding youth situation, and they agreed. So actually I was the person in charge of this group, and we managed to to organize some meetings in schools. We also organized one grand meeting with representatives of schools, with the representatives of a local university, And the result was the creation of 23 solutions that we think should be included in Just Transition Plan. And actually this was a success because most of the solutions were included in the plan. When I'm talking about these solutions, I mean solutions regarding the situation of young people, education, the situation of young people in the labor market. And I always thought that the Just Transition process itself is for the miners, is for the people that are being unemployed and so on. But the result of Just Transition, so what comes in 10, 15, 20 years, it's for the youth, because we are going to live in the new vision of this region. So we have to create this new vision because it's for us.
The biggest challenge is the lack of capacity at all levels. First of all, we focused on people that wanted to be involved and people that we could talk with, because usually it was this thing that, look, it's not good what you want to do, we don't want the mines to be closed. And we as NGOs, I think the miners, for instance, they didn't see us very, very nicely. But what we started to do in these years was to put the accent on the cultural identity and to develop projects that put a focus on our cultural identity and to collaborate more even with the miners. We started with some mural pictures, and I think the thing that helped us a lot was that one of the director of one of the 4 mines that are still open in Jiu Valley, he saw some of the mural pictures that we did. He contacted us, and then we helped them, the miners at Lonia mine, to make a picture that presents Saint Varvara and also scenes from the mine and the miners. And then we started to communicate more with the miners and everybody, and I think that now we can understand each other better, and we can, so everybody has the same goal.
Regarding the future in the Just Transition region, we have 2 types of mentalities, and it's not only in the Jiu Valley. We heard about this in every region like this, even though we went to Germany, France, or Poland, Czech Republic, or Romania. They are usually our parents or even elder people who say, yeah, you don't have now those opportunities which we had at some point in the past, where you had a job, you had a certain job when you had a sure future and so on. But what we see now is that all this process gives us a challenge, and this challenge helps us to become more close together one to each other, because we know that the thing that got together the communities from this mining region was the way they cooperated underground. We need this type of cooperation above the ground now for this process, and what we understood now is that this cooperation is the type of safety that also the youngsters need in order to see a better future in this region. Because I don't see that they are very happy, to stay in a big city or to stay in a place where you have a very high cost of life and where it's very expensive to stay. But if they have all those opportunities which they have in the bigger cities, they would like to stay home.
Just transition is really broad concept. It's about transition of our economy overall to make Europe the first climate neutral continent, which would touch every sector of the society, from the industry and energy sector, which are the first, but also it means also impact on agriculture, on food production, on many other aspects which need to be reformed to make our economy climate neutral. It will be important to have also Central and East European countries be part of that, because pioneering regions in our in our countries show that the transition could be really bottom up, could involve people, could involve young and actors or women and civil society for the change, and that there are positive aspects of that. We see that Central and East European countries could give already like good examples and could be on the front line and not be lagging behind.
If we implement those solutions as we want it to be, and we assess if they work, because we can assess it by those indicators, so unemployment, the number of births and so on, and then we can see if we have successfully completed the just transition process. And I hope in 20 or 30 years I will be much older than I am right now, but I will be just an adult person, and I want to see that in those 20 or 30 years I can live in this region. It's a stable region with a new vision, and the vision that I and other young people imagined. So that's what I wish for me and for other young people from Eastern Wielkopolska.
I think people are starting to realize the importance of having a just transition. And if I'm thinking of Jiu Valley, when I was little it was very polluted, even if the area is so nice and surrounded by natural parks. People, you were forced to leave, so maybe only the persons that couldn't leave the area stood there. But now the region is more and more attractive, and is because we are getting rid of the polluting industries. And I think that especially in the Jiu Valley, but in regions in transition in general, I think that the important thing is the people, citizens, love the area and trust in its future and get involved.
Dał mi kolejny taki napęd, kolejną tonę węgla dla mojej energii wewnętrznej, bym powiedziała. Tak, no, śmiejąc się, ale to jest coś, co we mnie bardzo tak zadziałało.
I'm afraid to place a vision because in my profession, I'm an architect oriented towards urban planning, and that means that whatever you build, you have a vision, but it's a very limited vision, if I can say so. When we discuss about territories, you're not the one who should place a vision upon a territory. I can say so as a professional, because the communities are the one who should maybe state this vision about the future. And now, what I want the most is to be, and also for my colleagues, to be a sponge, maybe to absorb the most from the youngsters, to understand how they see their vision about the region, because I know that this task about creating a vision will keep us together.